Let's welcome in John Krawczynski, senior writer for The Athletic, who covers the Timberwolves Minnesota reeling. They've lost 5 in a row. Their last win came in October when Derrick Rose scored 50 points against Utah. Were they desperate to make this trade to get Jimmy Butler out of town?
Yeah, they really were, Chris. I mean, they did get to a point, 0-5 on the West Coast trip, and you could just see it. I mean, the body language, the struggles. Tom Thibodeau had hoped that they could start the season with Jimmy Butler and win enough to convince him that Minnesota was the place he should be for the long term. As the season started, it became quickly apparent that they were not going to be able to do that. They were not playing well on either side of the court, and Jimmy kind of consistently was making it clear to them that nothing was going to change his mind. So they lose to Sacramento. They fall to 4-9. They're coming home for 10 home games in the next 12. With fans who are practically revolting on this franchise. They needed to make something happen, so they pulled the trigger.
Houston, Miami, two other teams that were rumored to be in the trade discussions about Jimmy Butler. So was this the best deal on the table, or do you think there were other deals that were out there that were comparable?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I do think that earlier in this week, Miami made it clear to the Wolves that Josh Richardson was no longer on the table. He has been playing so well for the Heat. And the Wolves could have had him at an earlier juncture. They decided not to do that. And so so the Heat decided this week that they were not going to put him back on the table. So that probably reduced Miami's standing in the race below Philadelphia's. And then when you talk about Houston offering 4 first-round picks or a combination of picks and other players, if this team wanted to really look long-term into the future and gather a bunch of assets that way and maybe take a couple of steps back, then maybe Houston would have been a better offer. But they wanted players who could help them right now. And they believe that Dario Saric and Robert Covington will fit in well with the group that they have here, and that will allow them to not have to take as big of a step back when you talk about giving up a 4-time All-Star in Jimmy Butler. So that was their decision. We'll kind of see how it plays out long term. But I do think that the Philadelphia deal does have some intriguing pieces for them, and it could kind of change up the rotation a little bit and slot in some guys in the pecking order below Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. That could help them move forward in a pretty decent fashion here.
I'm glad you mentioned Saric and Covington, because these are two guys that were starting in Philadelphia every game this season. What are their expected roles coming into Minnesota, I mean, especially with that 3 position wide open?
Yeah, you look at what they have there. What Glenn Taylor, the Timberwolves owner, really wanted when Jimmy Butler initially requested a trade way back in September was he wanted a guy who could slot into Jimmy's spot in the starting rotation. He wanted another young player and maybe a pick. And what he ended up with is a guy like Covington, I think, can play the 3 with Jimmy Butler there, Jimmy Butler's spot, right next to Andrew Wiggins, and can kind of bring some of that defensive intensity and that hard-nosed attitude, in addition to some shot making. So that'll help them. And I think Dario Saric, it will be interesting to see how they incorporate him. As a stretch 4, him and Towns together would be a formidable front-court offensive tandem. How would they do defensively? We'll have to see about that. And it also remains to be seen if Tom Thibodeau will want to keep Taj Gibson in that starting lineup at the power forward. Taj is one of Tibbs' favorite guys, and Gibson has been tremendous for this team really for the last 2 years. Or do you add Gibson to the bench and you bring Saric into that starting lineup? I'm sure that will be sorted out by Monday night when they play next. But that's an initial question that I think the coaches are going to have to work through here.
Something we'll certainly keep an eye on. John Krawczynski, a senior writer for The Athletic. Appreciate your time, my friend.